I'm Charlotte and this is Bookish Mama Blooms. So this is the Books of 2020 video that I've been putting off doing for a couple of weeks. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do it, and I plotted it out in my little book a few times, and like 2020 was a weird reading year. Aside from everything else, there's no room for everything else. Reading alone, look, when I look back on my list, I don't know if you guys have done the same, and I looked at the stuff I'd read before March, to me that felt like a completely different year, maybe even a completely different decade. So when I was trying to compare those early innocent reads of January to March with what came after, and then there was this huge kind of gap where I didn't read anything, I found that really difficult. And so when I was doing what I typically do, what you've seen in the past, is I've done a top 10 of fiction, a top 10 of non-fiction. For a start, I just knew I couldn't do that because I'd read so much less. I read, I think, 67 books in 2019, and I read 52 books in 2020. And yeah, that's not a huge difference, but actually it does make a huge difference when you're trying to find top 10s. You know, that's a bit of a drop. Also, I read a lot of non-fiction, way more than normal. And again, I think that's difficult when you've got some really strong contenders for non-fiction and then you're maybe not so sure about your fiction list. So what I decided to do was to be a little bit more organic about the whole thing. And I've come up with my top books, but I've separated them into categories. So basically I went through my whole list of everything I'd read, and then I just waited for these books to sort of shout out at me. And if they shouted out at me and I felt strongly about them, what difference does it make to you if I tell you that a book is at number 3 rather than number 7? That's just, I don't feel like in this instance that was useful. So it just became its top of whatever emotion or feeling or thoughts that book provoked. Okay, so we're going to dive straight in. So the first book on my list is the most profound deconstruction of our patriarchal world, told with such awe for the beauty of what remains that you will be left both heartbroken and inspired to change and to live. I know, it sounds like a lot to ask. That book is Chanel Miller's Know My Name. I don't know if I actually did an individual review for this. All of that time of 2020 is a bit of a blur, but this is everything I've just said. It is a deconstruction of the things that we take for granted. Even somebody who, like me, who thinks of themselves as a feminist and thinks of themselves as seeing through a lot of the kind of societal norms that patriarchy has created, you know, Chanel Miller blows that all up even further. She goes into the microscopic detail of the sort of reality she had to face after being raped in Stanford. So you know, she's the Stanford campus rape case. That's kind of what she's known as. She's been anonymous until she released this book, hence the title, Know My Name. It's amazing. It made me cry. It made me love life, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. So that is definite. I think if I had done a best of 2020 in the more traditional sense, that would have been probably my non-fiction read of the year. So, you know, I'm mentioning it first, we'll start off strong, but they're all good. The second one is the most surreal and yet realistic account of motherhood, selfhood and loneliness. So this is one of my pre-pandemic reads. I think it's maybe one of 2 that's made it into my final sort of top reads, and that's Territory of Light by Yūko Tsushima. So I've read 2 of her books, and both of them, the other one was Child of Time. Is it called Child of Time? It's just up on my shelf and I can't quite see it, but they're both kind of similar in a lot of ways, but this one was the one that stood out for me, and weirdly I think it's a really apt read for being in lockdown, because she's kind of in this top floor, a quite enormous flat that's got all this light coming in, hence the title, and she's going through this emotional trauma and trying to raise a child at the same time, and they're just stuck in together. It's really gripping, really short, but just beautifully written, and I loved it. So that is in there. Number 3 is the most inspiring novel on protecting the planet and seeing the sheer wonder and vastness of nature. So this is Overstory, Richard Powers. I was really late to the game in this. I can't even remember when this came out. Was it 2018, 19? 2018. What I will say is that in my original review, when I'd read the book, there was one thing that kept really grating on me, and that was the portrayal of somebody with a physical disability. I kept waiting for it to make sense, and then I kind of realised it was meant to be a metaphor, and I didn't like it as a metaphor. But in a classic way of somebody who doesn't have a physical disability, when I came to review it, I just didn't even mention that. And it wasn't until somebody commented, I can't remember who it was, but if it was you, thank you, about the portrayal of a gentleman in a wheelchair, that I was, I think I put a sort of disclaimer then. It's not good, that part of it. In fact, it's horrific. When you break it down, and when I stopped to think about it more and more, the more upset I got about it. It's hard to remove that from the book, but I also can't deny that the whole rest of the book just obsessed me. It just got me, I was obsessed with trees, I was obsessed with the plot, that some of the there's several characters that you follow throughout, and some of them, I mean, it felt like I've read 5 different novels really, and yeah, I could go on, but I'm trying to keep this video short, so it is wonderful. If you have got it on your shelf, give it a go, but just be aware of what I've said. Number 4, the most addictive. And by the way, when I'm saying 4, that's just I've got them in this order, but in no way is this the order in which I think you should read them or of importance. The most addictive, gossip-fueled, transportative novel that will make you forget it's 2020. Swan Song by Greenberg-Jephcott. I loved it. If you saw my review for it, I was just, obsessed with it. I was in the world of Truman Capote and all of his girls. I would love to read it again. It just really took me away from what was going on. It was probably one of the last reads of 2020 or probably maybe one of the only reads of 2020, where I just felt completely taken away from what was going on and was hooked on this for several days. And I think we need that. I think it's okay to remove yourself. In a slightly different vein, of actually throwing yourself right into the pandemic, is the most pandemic-inspired read of 2020. This is something would not have even entered my home, I very much doubt, had it not been for what has gone on, and that is Pale Rider by Laura Spinney, The Spanish Flu of 1918, and How It Changed the World. So I don't know how, I know that loads of people bought it at the start of the pandemic. I don't know how many people have read it. It's amazing, and I really thoroughly recommend it. Obviously written pre-pandemic. I think it's about a decade old. Where are we now? Oh, maybe not a decade, no. It's 2017, but it's a good 5 years before what's gone on. And you would just be shocked. I mean, I read this right at the start, I think maybe in April. You will be shocked reading this, how the world, maybe not country by country, has matched what happened in 1918, but how the waves and the mistakes that have been made between each wave, public attitude, school closures, all of those things are just completely repeated from 1918 in this pandemic in 2020. We've learnt nothing. The only thing that's improved has been the technology. That's pretty much it. And why would we have learnt anything? Because we're still living in a capitalist world. I could go on, but I won't. Really, really good. Definitely recommend. And actually quite an easy read. Number 6, the science book told with the most childlike wonder. Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs by Steve Brusatte. I still don't know if I'm saying his name right. This was bought because of my son's obsession with dinosaurs, which has since waned, because when you have a child of, Idris is 5, he was 5 this week, when you have a child of that age, they just have fads that last about a month and then they're on to something else. But he has gone in and out of dinosaur obsessions, and I think he'll probably go into it again. So I wanted to sort of keep up to date with him, and I love this book. This guy is obsessed. He's young, he's peppy, he talks about the people, the characters involved in the dinosaur game, and that's kind of, another side to it that you don't expect. So it's so far removed from being a dry book. Very much that sense of wonder all the way through. And number 7, best non-fiction, best Black Lives Matter, best anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchy, anti-racism book. So the whole shebang. And I've read a few of these, but not enough. But this is the one that was just blew me away. This is Bell Hooks' Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism. This just goes to show how there's no excuse for us not to be getting it right, because this is like, is this 80s? Yeah, 82. 82, and she's saying it all. You know, she's talking about intersectional feminism, you know, she's talking about how everything is interconnected. She's talking about white feminists ignoring black feminists, ignoring racism, putting their own gender ahead of racial hatred that was going on and racism that was going on. Everything in here is just completely relevant all the way through. I've made notes on almost every page because I just couldn't stop seeing something that she had framed so beautifully. And the attack on capitalism is really crucial to her attack on racism and her attack on patriarchy. The capitalism aspect of it I just felt was so strong and just made me enormously mad at the world. So I've got Bell Hooks' other one. I'm trying to look again to see the title because I haven't got a brain at the moment. Where is it? Oh, I can just about see it. I can't read it. I've got another one of hers, and yeah, this is the start of me being obsessed with bell hooks. The next one is the most unexpectedly plotted and beautifully executed book. This is a collection of short stories. So I'm not a big fan of short stories. A lot of you out there will probably feel the same. They tend to... I think they're sort of sold as being for a fast-paced world, but often I just get frustrated that I can't get more into the story that's being told. But this was amazing. This is Nalo Hopkinson's Falling in Love with Hominids. And I don't really read fantasy or sci-fi, so much so that I'm very reluctant to even say what this one is. Fantasy. Okay. Thank you to Tachian Press. Again, don't know how to pronounce that, for giving me that clue. Amazing. I just never knew what was going to happen next. There were crazy things going on, but it all came down to this idea of humanity and what humans do to one another. I mean, that's, you know, hence the title, Falling in Love with Hominids. And I've since bought A Brown Girl in the Ring, and I look forward to reading that in 2021. So awesome. I can, you know, it turns out I will read sci-fi and fantasy if it's the right one. 9, most escapist pre-COVID series, or series that is not including COVID, because some of these series are ongoing. Okay, so there's 2 that I've chosen for this. I have chosen Pages and Co. by Anna James. So there's 3 of these at the moment. Tilly and the Book Wanderers are basically, you know, is the first one, and then you've got Tilly and the Lost Fairy Tales and Tilly and the Map of Stories. I think they're 9 to 12. I think that's approximately the age range. They're amazing. They're wonderful. They're gorgeously illustrated. They're just about a girl who is the daughter of a bookshop owner, or granddaughter of a bookshop owner rather, and she can go inside books. In fact, certain people called book wanderers can all go inside books, and they can become part of the story, and then they can leave again. And there's also, you know, there's adventures. There's people trying to corrupt the system and close the books off and steal the book magic. It's amazing, and it has some real, it has sort of classic characters like Alice in Wonderland and stuff, but then it also has people coming in. So the last one had Shakespeare, and I really, really love them. You can read them in an afternoon, but I think they'll stand the test of time. And also the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman, which inexplicably I cannot find the third for, but I have read 3 of them. These 2 are ones that Sian has sent back to me. So I don't know where I've put my third one, but I absolutely love them. It's set in a secondary school. It's a graphic novel, so they're really, really easy to read. Gorgeous illustrations, and it's about 2 young boys who fall in love and navigating their love within a high school context, but without... she's been very open about how she's made it a safe space. She's made their world a world that you would want to go into. It's not without its problems, but it's not so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kept a safe space for them. There's a lot of support, and there's so much diversity. It's lush. Okay, where are we now? Best novel on the nuances and context of racism in the real world. And I've created these titles based on the books. I'm guessing that you get that. Such a Fun Age by Reid. It's one of my top books of the year. I just everything about it was brilliant. And if you've got it on your shelves, especially if you've been, you know, I've seen a couple of negative reviews of it and I was really disappointed. Not because people aren't entitled to their own opinion, of course they are, and not every book is for everyone. But I feel like what was missed in this was the fact that this was a different kind of story about racism. You know, this was about a protagonist who didn't necessarily want to tackle it the way the reader wants them to. And the reason for that is that that protagonist is a real person in the book and doesn't have the energy, you know, or the inclination. You know, she's allowed to make her own decision about what she does about a particular event happening to her. And if you're judging her as a reader, then you've kind of missed the point. I also found that the way that her life is described when she's hanging out with her girlfriends and stuff like that, it was just so refreshing, because so much of that kind of content is not seen as literary, you know, girls hanging out with each other. And yet we can read about men, you know, having existential crises and lounging around in their barely furnished studio apartments, drinking all day and then going out and smoking and talking about philosophy in cafes. I mean, God, you know, that sort of thing, give it the Booker. You have a good bunch of girlfriends going on a night out and going on the pull, and it's suddenly a bit too frivolous, you know. And I was really pleased to see it in here. I felt like it was believable. The code switching of the protagonist between her girlfriends and then when she goes to work for her white employer was also excellent. Yeah, just everything about it. I could talk about it. I meant to do a video on it, and I set up photographs so that I'd have a little thumbnail for the video, but I just never got around to filming it. So maybe I'll do it late. But that's my thoughts on that. Best book for reawakening the teenage witch within. Aren't we all trying to do that? I have chosen the book that inspired that is Amanda Yates Garcia's Initiated, Memoir of a Witch. So she is at the LA Oracle. You can find her on Instagram as that. And she makes a living out of being a witch. Sean was the one who put me onto this, off per story time. Thank you, Sean. And I really, really enjoyed it. Didn't necessarily relate to all of the things that she said in it, which I don't think is always important. But sometimes when you're really getting into the way someone's writing and then they sort of go off on a tangent, she lives quite a wild life, and I just haven't done that. So I enjoyed it, but the thing that most sort of invoked in me was just this desire to get involved in spiritual practice in whatever shape that may be. So I very much enjoyed. And we've got a couple left. We'll get into it. The most mind-bending science book that is also likely to inspire a generation of readers to invest in a fungus spore coffin. I mean, it's a niche one, but it is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. So it'll be no surprise to you, because I really love this book. I made a whole video on it. But this is an amazing book about fungi. If you haven't read it, even if you don't think you're interested in fungi, I kind of think you should just pick it up anyway, especially if you can get it from the library. It's about everything. It's about environmentalism. It's about consciousness, you know. It's about the universe. It's about who we are, why certain chemicals do certain things. What is the world doing? You know, this is what always fascinates me. We're in this pandemic, and I look out the window and I see the blackbirds. They don't care that it's a pandemic. They don't know. They're just carrying on. But what do they make of all the things we've built? You know, there's so many things out there that we don't really think about because we centre ourselves. And in this, Merlin Sheldrake kind of shows that we are just nothing, you know, to this planet, and that fungi, if anything is meaningful to this planet, it is fungi. So I really enjoyed. I'm running out of room. Can I balance that there? Yeah, it's good to go. So the last one on my list, and it would have topped my book of the year, and it's I've given it the title Best Fiction Read and All-Round Read of 2020, with the most original storyline that I've encountered in years, and that is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And I know this has topped other people's lists. This topped Sean's list. I loved it. It's no secret that I loved it. I told you I loved it. It feels sometimes like two separate books. There's a first half and a second half. If you've read it, you know what I mean. But both halves are amazing. It talks about everything. It talks about colonialism. It talks about heritage. It talks about tradition. It talks about the patriarchy, you know, relationships between the sexes. It talks about the natural world. in a Native American context, it discusses things like respect for elders, tradition, how you connect with those things in the modern world, just everything. And behind all of that is this gripping horror story, you know. I think it was Sean that said that you should never look at a ceiling fan in the same way again. Completely agree. And if I ever saw an elk, it would definitely transport me to this book. So I really, really loved it, and I'm scared. I loved it so much that I've got that feeling of being scared to try any of his other stuff in case I don't like it as much. But I will give it a go. Oh, I've let my tea go cold. That is the price you pay for filming. Oh, it's not too bad actually. So I hope you enjoyed that selection, and if you've read any of those books and felt the same way or differently, then I would really like to know in the comments. And I'd also like to know, if you don't have a YouTube channel especially, I always really like it when people give me their top 10s or top book of the year, if you'd rather just keep it simple, just because it'll give me some food for thought as to what I'm going to read next year. I've got loads of books that I bought that I have not started, so if your book comes up and I've actually got it on the shelf, it might prompt me to put it on my TBR. Okay, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year. Bye.